All right, so welcome to today's class. I hope you are all doing well by God's grace. And today's lesson is a follow or a backup of what we did the last time. But today we are going to focus on fundamentals, HTML fundamentals. In the previous episode, we talked about how to structure our HTML file. We talk about how the web worked and some HTTP protocols. Basically, then we concluded by building a simple bio project, including two pager, that is the home and the about page for a professional bio, where we also included image. But today we are going to focus on forms, creating a form for a client using HTML, CSS. So at the end of this lesson, you'll be able to create a form similar like this, having a client name, email, phone number, and some information needed for the client to submit for a work. So let me quickly jump into it and move on. So now let's talk about forms. Why form matters in HTML, CSS? Form matters because form is actually the core brain for interaction when it comes to the web. Before you access something, even on the mobile app, anywhere, you need to what log in, create accounts, register whatsoever, and it's done by what forms. So forms accept what input, and these inputs are being what saved. So basically, forms allow user registration, contact messages, payments. For instance, when you are trying to make payments online, if you have something that you purchased, you use forms to add your payment details, the card number, expiry number, and so on. Similarly, service as well too. We use forms for service, for conducting research, for user validation, for our idea validation, and so on. And you have the business inquiries. That is what we will be actually be building at the end of this lesson. Then let's talk about how form works in what HTML, CSS, or let's say how whenever you fill a form on the internet, how it works. So it works very simple. One, it works by using what an input. Okay. So for example, when you were registering for the national service program, you created an account. Okay, you fill a form and you submitted. So after filling the form, you click submit, the browser sends the data and the server will process it. So let's say you are the user here. Okay, the user, this is the button that you click. Okay, this is the button that you click. This is the browser. This is the browser. Let me use secure for the browser. And this is the database. That is the server. So this is where all information sits. Okay, so let's say we have multiple information, plenty information here, because you're not the only user using the platform. Good. So you the user here, you fill a form. So uh, this is the form that you fill. Okay, you fill the form. You fill the form nicely. Then after filling the form, what you did is that you press what submit, click submit. So when you click submit, it goes into your browser here, and the browser here is also called, let's call it the route, that actually directs your information to the server. So this is the route. This is the route. Then the route to takes your information and send it to the database. Okay, then it gets saved. This is whenever you are registering or creating an account. Good. After it gets saved, you come back to to log in. So let's say you come back, you type in your email that you used during registration and the password that you created during the registration. The moment you finish and you click submit, this route here again also takes the information. This, when you click submit, it takes the information to the route, and the route takes it to the database here. But what it does is that it checks that the email that you provided exists in the database. If the email exists in the database, it's fine. It also checks whether the password that you added during login matches the one you added during creation of the account. So if everything matches, if the password and the email matches, it sends you a successful message that, hey, you've logged in successfully, because when we're doing the validation, your password and the email matches. But when it checks and the email and the password doesn't match, it sends you what an error message that, hey, maybe invalid credentials or maybe wrong password. Okay, so that is where it talks about the server what processing. So whenever you send something to the data and the server is processing, it's processing for two things: checking whether the information that you are adding is validated, matches the one you added during registration, or it doesn't. If it does, do this. If it doesn't, do this as well. Great. Now let's continue. Let's talk about the form tag. So whenever we are building a form in our HTML, we use the what the form tag. Like how whenever we are doing something like we are writing a paragraph, we use the P tag. Whenever we are trying to change the heading, we use the H tag. Whenever we are trying to bullet something, we use the UL or OL tag. The same way, whenever we are trying to add a form, we use the word form tag. This tells our code that whatever that comes below this or in between this is a form. So we treat it as a what as a form. For example, if I change this particular form and I do something like label, it is not going to treat it as a form because I'm telling the tag that this is what a label. So this is the tag we use for form. That is the form tag, and this is only an opening tag because you don't have the closing tag. Now let's talk about the attributes for forms. We have a lot of attributes, but here I'm going to focus on the two attributes. That is the action and the method. When you talk about the action is what where the data goes. So let's someone will say that the data goes into the what database. That is correct. But how will the data go into the what database? It is done by doing what performing a certain what action. And an action that is performed whenever you are filling a form is just pressing the what submit button. So should in case you press on this submit button, you are performing an what an action. Okay, you are performing an what an action, and the action that you are performing a what a post action because you are adding something into the what database. You are performing a what a post action. So you are adding something here, you are doing post, and you are getting something here. That one too is a what is a get. So you can see that we have two methods on how data is sent. So data is sent through the what the get and the what post. So the post is you the user sending something to the internet, and the get is mostly like you getting something from the what from the internet. So it is basically you post something or you what you get something, or you send to the internet, or you upload to the internet. You are doing a post what method. What you are getting to, you are doing what a get what. So whenever you come to this particular URL in here, we have the two methods there. We have the get and we have the post. So basically, we use the post for the sensitive information, like when you post something to the internet. That is why I said your data is being processed to check, okay, whether the information is being sensitized, whether the information really matches our validation. For example, whenever you are maybe logging into some platforms, they have their own way or their own formatting of you adding their password. Okay, so if your way of adding password doesn't match their unique style, they try to prompt you that, hey, you've mixed something here, there is something I need to add here before you can actually get access to the browser or to the dashboard. That is how the post method also works. Now let's go to the other slide. Let's talk about the input types. When you talk about input types basically they are the input every field what accepts. So input types are types that we assign to what to values. We assign it to values so that you know the type of data type that is coming onto this particular field, and the type of data type that is coming on this particular field. Let's talk about the test. So we have the what input type test. These input type types decide what the user can what enter inside what a tag. So if you are, let's say, adding a name, since name accepts test, we need to let the user know that here we need to add what a test instead of what, let's say, email or a password. When you are adding email as well, we need to let the user know that, hey, here we are adding what email. Okay, so for instance, let me wipe this. Okay, For example, we are adding name to a field. Sorry, the n has turned to m. Name. Then we are adding an email. Then we are adding, let's say, a phone number. A phone number. Good. And these are the field. These are the field. Now we need to let the user know that, hey, this field we need to add only what text. Okay, only text. Here, this we need to add only email, and this field we need to add only phone number. The question is, how will the user know that this field only accepts text? The user will know whenever the user has mistakenly typed in something wrong. So for instance, I come here and I add 1, 2, 3, and I click save. The moment I click save or login, it's going to prompt me that there is an error. The input type field is what's wrong, meaning we don't accept numbers, but we accept what text. Same way, let's say my email is emmanuel@gmail.com. Then I do it Emmanuel without the at, then I bring the .com. I'm going to get error, or I'm going to get invalid data or type or invalid input type. The reason is that because this email field has been known to accept email input type, it's going to treat everything as email. So me not bringing the at sign is going to prompt me that, hey, this thing is not a valid email. You need to bring the at sign to be what to valid. For instance, the same as the phone number as well too. With the phone number here, I need to use what tell. The question is, someone asked, why is it that you are using text for the name and we are not using numbers for the phone number? The reason is simple. Phone numbers, phone numbers are tell are treated that they accept phone numbers to be 10. Whenever we use numbers here, someone can type in more than 10 what numbers, which is wrong. Okay, but this tell here would only limit the person to only type in only what 10 numbers. You understand? So let's say when I come and I type in my number here and it's more than 10, whenever I try to submit, I'm going to get an error because the input type here doesn't really matches the input type in this particular phone number field. Okay, now let's get to the actual logic. Let's talk about the select. Okay, the select drawdown here in HTML CSS. Whenever you have a field to select from an option, maybe you want the user or the client to choose from multiple options, you use the word select and the word option tag. So the select is telling the user to what select a particular what thing from this particular optional what drop down. And I believe when you get into the practical, you're going to understand more of that. Now let's go to the long text input text area. Okay, so for example, we need to have let's say a bio. Okay, a bio. Let me try to add the field. Yeah, a bio, a field that actually asks for your bio. And you can see that you know that bio, you cannot have a very smaller field like this for bio because it's only it will only accept what one liner or text. But the bio, we need to write more about ourselves. Okay, we need to write more about ourselves. The question is, how then can I get a bigger text input or text area so that I can write more or more description of what I want? Okay, that one we use the what the label of text area. Whenever you use text area, automatically it enlarges your field. It makes it bigger for you to add more than one line of what text. Okay, you can add multiple text to it, and the more you add, the more the form what increases. The good thing about this text area is that you can decide to what enlarge it as larger as you want, depending on how you want it to be, or depending on the what the input text that you want it to go into this particular description form here. You understand? Now let's get to the other the next slide. That is the labels that actually makes form professional. You understand? So we have labels in form. The reason is you see that without labels, there is nothing like you filling a form. And even with human, everybody is labeled because our unique identity is our name, right? So if I come into a class of 50 and I'm looking for one person, and I'm looking for one person, what is going to make me get that particular person is the person's label, and that is the person's what name. Okay. Without the person's name, I won't be able to know the person. Aside this person, the person what physical appearance whatsoever. So labels informs the name here is a label, the email here is a label, telling that this field here should this field here we are adding a name, this field here we are adding what an email, and also the same applies to the phone number label here, meaning this form you are adding a what a phone number. Should in case let me clean this, should in case there is no label for the what for the phone number and there is a field here, when I'm filling a form here and when I get to this particular field, I wouldn't know what to put here because there is no label, there is no identity for this particular field. I might choose to skip. But let's say when I skip and I'm trying to save and I get that no, there is missing required field, and I come back, yes, then I wouldn't know what to put here because this particular field doesn't really have a label. Great. So why it matters is basically simple for readers to read it very well, for you to be what clickable to select fields, and also for your form to look professional and improve more like accessibility for people to know what they are doing, where they are inputting something, and where information should what you get into it. Now let's go to a required field. Whenever we talk about something being required, the thing is what's needed. So this one is more user friendly, and a lot of us have experienced this thing before. Sometimes, whenever you are filling a form, let's take say with Google Forms and so on, it makes some field what's required, and those fields are field that those information are quite what needed. The rest are more like a supportive information for subsequent what maybe analysis of subsequent what backup information. So information like your name, your email, your phone number, that is the demographics information. Most of them are what's required. And before you see that the information is required, they put something like an asterisk or an indicator on it, whereby whenever you skip that particular form, you get what a validation message that hey, this form is particular what's required. So we use it for, as I said, we use it for what's name, email, service selections, and budget. So think of it like the important things that you really want to get in your server or your database per whatever that you are doing. So the fields that are required and the fields that are what optional. With the optional fields, when the user tries to add anything or user doesn't add anything, you don't really lose. But the required fields are what you're actually looking in for most. Now let's talk about placeholders and labels. See that these are what labels and placeholders are what goes on inside the field. So for example, you are filling a form and you open the form, let's say first open the form, and when you open the form you saw something like add your name, okay, or let's say there is the form and you see there is something written here that's what full name. So full name, there is something written here like full name. Let me do it full name. So full name, the question is we have a name here, why do you have full name here? The answer is very simple. See that here on the labeling it wasn't specified that we should add our full name here, right? Good. So this placeholder is telling you that whatever that you're going to add into this field should be a full name. Although the label didn't tell you that it should be a full name. The label is going to tell you that so to prevent the issue whereby people are just going to add their name, let's say, without their full name, we have a placeholder that actually represents what that field is expecting you to add. But the moment you start to type, that placeholder what exists. Okay, it's mostly happens whenever you are trying to add a phone number to maybe a form or a login something. You can see that the phone number have a placeholder of +233, meaning that this field, the format of your phone number should be in the what country coded format, okay? Because some might use the 02 blah blah blah, but that particular field is really telling you that no, hey, it should start with the what the country code from wherever that you are coming from. If it's Ghana, maybe the plus what wait, telling you that this is a placeholder or this is how you want the text or the input should be in this particular what field. So the difference between a placeholder and a label is that label gives a particular field an identity, and the placeholder tells you what you need to actually put into the field. So more like a blueprint, more like an instruction that is actually telling you what to do in a particular field. Then let's talk about what we're doing. So we're building a basic client project intake form. That is the client intake form. For example, you work as a freelancer, you are more like a software engineer or digital marketer. Then you you hunt for clients online. Okay, you need to create a form to gather what clients want you to do. The form should contain maybe the client's name, email, and a phone number, then your service that you offer, your price range, and maybe a little description about what the person really want you to do. So at the end, you are going to do this particular basic what client project intake form. That will actually, power our theoretical aspect of this particular course. So now let's get into the practical. So before, the prerequisites are having a VS Code editor. The last time in the previous episode, I explained how to download the VS Code editor and also getting it set up and getting it ready on your local PC. Now let me pin my VS Code. My VS Code. So this is what we're doing. So let me open. This is my VS Code, and let me get a two-sided stroke. So today we'll be building a real business with client intake form. And this is a type company uses to, as I said, they use to collect clients' information, understand the client of the particular product, and know the client what budget. Okay, that is what we are going to create basically. So what we need to do is that we need to have now today forget about the to do what file here. This to do file is just there to guide us to know what we are going to do. So we will create only one file for today because we are looking for only a form. So the form is only one page out form. So we need to create a file for what's named client form.html. So this should be our file. That is the step one. So when you create a folder, the folder should be client form. And inside the folder, you need to have a file named client form.html. That is the file. Great. Then when you are done, that is the step two. What you're going to do is that you're going to add a basic HTML structure. Last time I showed you guys how to add a basic HTML structure using the shortcut. Let me close the form so that you can have a bigger screen for the code. So let me do Ctrl plus B to close it. Great. Now let's create our the HTML basic structure. Press Ctrl plus the one. So sorry, Shift plus one, then press Enter. So whenever you press enter, it brings up a basic HTML structure. And this HTML structure is telling your file that hey, you are coming to perform an HTML code base. You are coming to write HTML code. You see that we have doc type here, and this doc type here basically is telling us that this type of our document is HTML. That is why at the end of this file, added .html, meaning anything that we input here is listed into HTML. Great. Now let's change the title of our document. So the title of our document is client intake form. Okay. And I also said that anything that we add in the header does not matter. Anything we add in the header does not matter. It doesn't really affect anything in the body here. Okay. What really matters is everything that we add in this body here. So now we are going to focus solely on the on the body. Okay, we're going to focus solely everything on the body here. Great. So let's start with the body. So we are going to in the body we are going to add something called a semantic structure. When we talk about semantic structure, when I open this image, you will see that it have a header, that is the orange. It have a main, that is the green. You have the footer, that is the red. That is called a semantic structure, meaning the header contains the title of the project. The main contains detailed information of the page of whatever we are doing, and the footer contains maybe some contact details like copyright infringement or whatsoever that we want to add to our website. So the main is where we are going to do a lot of what coding, a lot of what inputting in there. Now let's add our semantic header, as I said. So inside the body, inside this body here, what we are going to do is that we are going to open a tag and say header. Tell it that here we are going to add the header here, then we close it. Good. So this header that we are going to add, so this is our header. Now let's add content. Let's add content into the header. What should be our header? The header should be what? Client what? Intake what? Form. Okay, header should be client intake form. But before we add the header, we need to tell the header that no, you should be the what? Bigger text on the project so that the header will stand out. So if you want to do that, we use the what? H1 tag, meaning that hey, this text here is our main heading. Okay, so the H1 tag means that this text here is our what? Is our main heading. I hope I'm making myself clear. Is the main what? Heading. So when I run my code, I go. If you want to run your code, go live. You can see a go live. You tap on the go live. It will open a browser. So you can see that we have what? Client intake form nicely here, and I hope you can see that we have client intake form nicely here. Watch something. If I change this to H2, what will happen? If I change this to H2, you can see that the font type, or sorry, the font size has reduced. Okay, but no, we want it to be, we want to treat it as the main header. So we are doing it with header 1. When you do it header 1, you see that the size has what? Increased. Great. Now what is next? Let's add the what? The main. Let's go back and add the main tag. That is where we are. Here is where we are going to add more things. Okay, the main tag is where we are going to add more things. So let's forget about that. So right now, what we've done is that we've added the header here, we've added the main, but the main we've not added any content. Okay, so let's go to the footer. So now when we open our group tree, let's add a footer tag. So we have the footer. Okay, and the footer you need to add something. Okay, we need to add, let's say, our business name, some business information. And before we add any text, we use the what? The P. We use the P what? Tag. That is the paragraph tag. So let's say at 2026, maybe at 2026, maybe Sharon's software solutions. Okay, Sharon software solutions. So when you come here, you see that 2026 Sharon software solutions. Let's try and add some phone number to it. So let's go down and do P. Contact. So let's say contact is 05066266068. Great. Then whenever we come here, that's our contact. Now we are done. Now our main focus should be the body. Okay, this should be our main focus. The body should be our main focus. Now let's go back and continue with the body. Let's open our code and do that. So inside this body, what we are going to do is that we are going to create the form element. See that I was explaining something about the action. Okay, that is we have the method and an action. Okay, so now let's create a form. Let's go to the main and do something that form. Okay, then let's close it. And the form that we are doing, we are going to do action. Meaning whenever you are dealing with a form, you are trying to do an action, because you can't add a form and just leave it like that. I hope I'm making myself clear. You can't create a form and leave it like that. So whenever you create a form, you are going to do an action. We need to specify that hash. So this is going to tell us that you are going to do an action. Then we add a method. So let's add a method. And the method that we are going to add. Now we are not coming to get information. We are not coming to add information. So we need to do a post method. Okay, we need to do a post method. So basically that is it. So now we are saying that we are come to write what a form. We are come to add a form, and the form that we are come to add, we'll be doing a post, meaning we are come to post something. We're not come to get what information. Good. So if you see that here, action is where data goes, okay, and the method post is what secure what data what submission, as I explained earlier on. Then the step 5 is let's add client name. Now the form that we are come to create, we are come to take what the client name, the email, and a what and a phone number. Okay. Now let's add those fields. Then come back to this. So let's go back to our code editor here. Then let's start to add the what the field. But before you add a field, you need to add a label. You need to ensure that this particular field should be what name. So we open our tag, then say label. Okay, then we are labeling it for what name. We're labeling it for name. Okay, then let's close it. When you close it, what is the label name? We want it to be client what client name. Okay, client name. So let's go back to our code and see something. Now we have what client name. Okay, we have client name, but I want someone to observe something here. You can see that we have the client name here, but when you tap on it, we cannot input anything here. It's just client name raw text, but there is no field where we can input something. Okay, so we've just added the label, but there is no field. Okay, so instead of us to add a field here, more like a rectangle here, now we can add something. That one we use the word input. Okay, so we come down here, then do input. Okay, when you do input, then we do type. That is here is where the data types comes in, because we are taking what client name, the type should be what text. We cannot use what numbers, because whenever we use numbers, anything that we input should be what numbers. But here we are taking name, and name should be what numbers. Sorry, text instead of what numbers. Then we add an ID, and the ID should be what name. We said what name. Okay, then we are saying name should be name, and it should be what required. The reason why we are doing when we said input field, and we are accepting what type what text. Okay, and we are saying ID is equal to this name, and name is name and required, because we want the client to add a name here. We don't want the client to skip. We want to make the name required. At the end of the input label, we need to state that this particular field is what required, so that the client cannot skip this particular field and move to the what to the other what field. Great. Then let's go to the other what other one. The other one too, we are going to add an email. Okay, that one we are going to follow the same process, but what will change here is the type here, text, and the name here. Okay, so what I'll do is that I'll copy the same thing, because it also needs to have a label and what an input field. For example, if I copy this label here and I come down and I paste it here, okay, let's go back to our code and I refresh. What happened? You see that the client name and this client name is continuously, and I don't want that, because I want the next field to follow. We use something called break, line what break, and it's done by BR. So we do BR, close it. You can see that it has come down, but I want it to come down again. I'll do another BR. That is what line break. It will come down again, so that our form is what vertically what structured nicely. Okay, good. Here is the case. Here I want to take what email, so I need to change this to what to email, or let's say client email. So here I'll change it to what email. Okay, so you can see that now I have my label, but I don't have the what input field. Okay, so I need to add an input field, so I can just copy this input, then bring it here. What I will change is so that the input field will come, but here is accepting what text, but no, the email I don't want text. I want it to accept what email. So I'll change the data type to what to email. I'll do the ID to what to the email, and email. You understand? Good. Now I come to do the same thing for the phone number, because this is the phone number. I come to do the same thing for the phone number. So I'll copy this, the label, come down and change it to, instead of email, I'll change it to what? To phone number. And I'll change this one to client phone number. Okay, client phone number. Then I need to add an input field to the client phone number, because now it doesn't have any field. So I can copy this, the input, and come and paste it here. When I come and paste it here, I need to change the data type. Here I can assign number. Then I can assign number. Okay, but when I assign number, meaning you can see this particular drop down up here. Okay, I can type in as many as I want. You see that it's going, and that is wrong, because it's a phone number. You need to make it rather tell, so that it basically treats everything here as tell. So you see that when I change the type to tell, the up and down select out just exit from there. Okay, they're having some errors here. Let me fix that error. There's this line of code. So you could see that, right? Great. Now we have our client name, client email, and client phone number. Good. Let's go back to our image and see what is left. Now let's go to the select service. We need to add a field whereby the client can select the field, like the kind of let's say thing that you offer, the kind of thing that you offer, the typical job the client wants to do for the person. So as you being a software engineer, let's say you design, you build mobile apps, you build websites, you build USSD, you can also manage social media accounts. Okay, so all are part of your services, what you do. Okay, then let the client select from them. So let's go back to steps. Now let's go back. What we do is that inside there, what we do is that let's come down here, then label, add a label, the field label for is the same thing. Let's copy this, then add. Okay, but here we want service, so let's label the field service. So client service. Okay, great. Now whenever we go around, you see that we have client service label. Now you need to add a field. Good. So before we add a field, because the field, we are not allowing the client to type, we are allowing the client to select. You need to add a select tag, and we pass and select ID is equal to service. What we want it to do is equal to service, and the name is service, and service is required, meaning you can't skip filling the form without adding service. Okay, so basically that is what we want. You can't skip filling the form without adding service. Now let's go back and refresh. So you see that there is more like a drop down here, but we don't want it like that. When you're done, you see how the form will be. Now let's go back to our step. Then come down. What we need to do, we need to add options of our skills, that what we do. So we open tag, we open a tag, and tag is named option, and the option add a value. So what value are we saying it is? So the value is maybe websites. Okay, website, and the website, what do? I do website development. You see that this is our opening tag, and this is our closing tag. The one with the slash, everything with the slash, every time with the slash, the closing tag. So we have website development, but I made a mistake here. I need to add a placeholder, so that whenever you see that field, the field will show you that select service, so that you know that, hey, this place I need to select. I don't need to type. So the option should be option. Okay, value equals to empty. Let's close it, and let's add select service. Then so let's go back to our code. When I refresh it, okay, I'm getting an error. Let me fix that. So you see that you are having select a service even before you can open the drop down. Okay, it's done by the help of what? This placeholder. That's why I said placeholders tells you what to do in the field. So this one is a placeholder. It doesn't mean you've added something. It's just trying to tell you that do this and this and do that. Okay. So because let me delete this. Right now we don't have anything in the word service. So when the client open this, it will be what's empty. Now let's add the services that you do so that the clients, whenever the client open this drop down, the client will see all your services and select from. So now let's add one. The first option value is, let's say, website development. Let's add another one, and this one, let's change it to what? Mobile, and make it what? Mobile app development. Okay, so whenever it opens, you see that we have website development, then what? Mobile app what? Development. So we have two options here for now. Let's add the last one, and let's make it social media management. So I'm getting error because there is no. So let's make it socials and make it social media management. So when I open this, I have social media management as well. I can choose from for what I want the person to do for me. Now that we are done, let's go to the budget range. So we want to add a budget that the client can really offer for you. Okay, so when you open our form, you see that there is a budget range that the client can choose, maybe to know how the client has budgeted for the particular project. So the budget tool is being done in something called a group tree, okay, or a button what groupings, so that the client can only select the button from a specific range. We are not doing it maybe a stated figure, but what ranging. That one you are going to get more like a direct perspective of budget from the client, because the client wouldn't want to be specific on a certain amount. So the range is going to make the client what choose an amount that is going to be more like a negotiable for both parties. So we are going to use the what this budget range here using a button using a checkbox here. So when you go back to our code editor, we are using something called a radio buttons that allows only one selection, as I said. Okay, so now let's come down here. Now we are done with the select client. So let's come down here, then add a paragraph. But before, let's break it. BR, and I hope you understand what I'm doing here. What I'm doing is very simple. I don't want whatever that we do here to continue from this. I want us to break that particular field, so that anything that we add will start from a fresh line. So whenever we go here, any field I'll add here will be here. So if I shouldn't have bring this BR out of the way, anything we type will be following or continuing from here. So now let's add our radio button to only allows the client to select a fixed budget. So what we need to do is that we need to come down and add paragraph. Okay, and the paragraph that you're adding, we need to add maybe budget range. We actually able to budget range. But if you see that this budget range test is good, but I would like us to make it header 2, so that it becomes unique from the other field labeling. So for header 2, you come here and do bracket h2, close it, then come here, h2 again and close it. So now let me close this and close this as well. Good. So when I come here, pardon me, I'm coming. So I did a mistake. Should be closed. 82. So you could see that this budget range here is now having a different font what size and font what type. Okay, great. Now let's go back and add the ranging. So I'll come down and do the label. So first you need to add a label. So you say label and you close it. Okay, and I'm going to add all our inputs in this label. The label is just the budget range. Then we are going to add our budget range. So let's do input type. You can see that we do input and we are saying the type should be radio, meaning we need to select from multiple options, meaning we need to select from a range. Then let's name it budget. Let's name it budget. Then let's say value. The value is the range. So let's say 500, starting 500 to 1000 Ghana cedis, and it is required. You need to choose. Okay, then you close it. Then we come down here to actually write our actual budget. So let's make it in Ghana cedis. So Ghana cedis. So whenever I come here and I see the budget range first, there is my first range here. That is the Ghana 500 to 100. That is my budget range. Now let's add more budget range. What you can do is that you can basically or only select or copy this. Okay, copy this, the label, come down, paste, just changing the values here. So if the first one was 500 to 1000, so let's say 1000 to 3000 Ghana cedis, and should have 1000 to 3000 Ghana cedis. When you come here, you see that we have, so the second one is 1000 to 300 Ghana cedis. The question is, why is it that this you're having first and second year and you want the other budget to be below, okay, to be down, like how in our image you have the first one up, second one down, and third one up. The reason is very simple. I didn't add a line break here. So instead of here, I should have done the BR. Okay, another BR, so that it can go down nicely. So now that you can see that, okay. Now let's add the BR to here to BR. Then let's add another labeling. Let me copy this. Add, change the this one to 3000 to 5000 Ghana cedis, and change it to 3000 to 5000 Ghana cedis. So show that this is our budget range nicely. Okay, basically this is our form. Then let's add now let's add a submit button, or let's add a test area. Let's go back to our image. So when you go back to our image, we need to, after selecting a budget, you need to add a description. Okay, and the description should have a field which is bigger enough to accept more than one field. Good. Now let's go back to our code editor here. Then go back to our next step. So our next step is project description, using the test area tag as I explained in the theory. So now let's come down here and enable our test let's first label it. So label, we're labeling for description. Okay, for description. Then it will be if you are labeling for description, it will be project. Let's make it project description instead of description. Project. Okay. Let's make it project description. Great. Now that we are done, this one is not correct. So now that we are done, when you go to our page, we have project description, but there is no field for that. So let's go back and add the field, and the field that we are going to use will be test area, because we want a larger field so that we can add in more test. Good. So this is it. So you say that test. We open a label and say test area. Okay. Then ID should be what? Description. Then the name should be what? Description. And the rows should be, let's say 8 or let's say 5. And we should be what? Required. Great. Now that it is required, what we need to do is that we need to go and check whether our required test area has been added. Now let's go back, refresh. You see that project description here has been added. Now I can basically adjust it to any size that I want. Okay, any size that I want, because we want to have a place that we can add a lot of text, plenty description for our project. Then let's do line break. Let's break it so that everything we type will go below. So a line break. You see that there has been space here, meaning whatever I type here can come here nicely. Now let's go to the next step. So the next step is what? Professional start date. You want to add a place whereby the client can choose when he or she will want to start. Okay, so that one too, we are going to use the date type is the same as this, same label as this one. Let me copy this and come below, come down, add it. What we are going to change is that we are just going to change anything description and do it start date. So let me undo, start from afresh. So first let's label forward start date, then preferred date or preferred start date. Then let's go down, then add the input. So input type here, the input type will be what? Will be date, because you want date. Then the ID start date, whatsoever that is. Then the name is start date nicely. Okay, so I want to let's break it here. Now let's go and check how our date field is. So when I come here, you see that this is the date field. Okay, so I labeled it. So let me delete this. You see that this field is gone. Okay, so this is my label. So there's a label. Now let me add back the field, and this is the field. And the field, because the type I said type date, that gave me this particular placeholder here, meaning we are accepting date. Okay, so if for instance I remove this and add numbers, or maybe number, you see that the text box has changed because it's accepting numbers. But here I need to state that it's accepting the input type of date. And I hope you get me. Great. Now let's go back to the last step. Let's add a submit and a reset button. Okay, so that we can submit our form, or the client can submit or reset the form successfully. So that one, you come down, you open that one. You're not going to do input. That one is a button, so you open a tab called a button tag. Okay, then you close it, then you add type. What's the type of the button? You want this button to do what? To submit. Okay, great. So this button is doing what? Submitting something. So let me clear. This button is what? Submitting something. Same way for the receipt. So button, okay, type. This button is what? Resetting. So whenever I come here and I refresh, I'll see that I have submit and reset button nicely. So basically this is how the form is being done. So the form, you need to what? Label the form. You need to what? Add your input. And this your input is where you will state that you should accept this type or you don't want to accept this type. So basically, this is how you create what forms in what HTML, what CSS. The most important thing that I need to know is that every field should have what a label. After the label, every field should have what an input, and at the end of every input, you need to add a what a line break that brings another field what down nicely. So basically, this brings us to the end of the what the form creation course or the form creation class that we needed to do. I hope I was really going fast. Apology for that. And I just encourage everyone to adjust these tutorial videos to suit how he or she wants to be. Pause wherever you want to pause based on how fast I was going. Go back wherever you want to go based on how fast I'm going. And drop any suggestion or anything that you have in you that we discuss with. I wish you all the best and happy learning. Don't forget to get in touch and thank each and everyone for coming as well. Hoping to see you guys in the coming weekend class where we are going to talk about how to style our website, add colors, add this to make it all very beautiful and appealing to what to users. Until then, have a wonderful day and see you in the next one. Bye bye.